Hey YouTube, this is Cheesefactory, and this is my second chess video. Another one I played online, kind of a cool game, with the French defense, I believe. So, e4, e6, this is French, d4, d5, knight c3, defending pawn, he captures, I capture, and knight to f6. Attacking my knight. Although I could take, but it's not so good if I do. Like, here's how it might go. Like, knight takes, queen takes. Yeah, you see this is just like, doesn't look that nice. He's got this castle, pretty good development. I don't know. I don't really like that. An interesting move I didn't think about at the time was bishop to g5, pinning the knight, and then after that, knight comes for check, pawn must take because the queen would get taken by the bishop, and then bishop comes back here. And it looks pretty good. But what I played was knight to c3. And he responded with bishop to b4 and bishop to b2. He castled kingside and knight to f3. Interesting thing to note, he could have taken here. It's undefended. But it does not go very well for black if you do, because knight comes out and you have a couple options. You can either bring the queen all the way back, at which point maybe this could be a variation, and white has much better development on board control, which is easily compensation for the pawn. So it's not really worth it, even though it's a free pawn. So instead, that's why he castled, and then I played knight to f3 to defend this pawn. And rook to e8, lining him up with my king. So if this pawn gets out of the way, then no good. I played queen to e2, which is really dangerous, because if this pawn wasn't here, my queen would be pinned and lost. So very dangerous move, but I really wanted to castle queenside, so I decided it was worth the risk. b6, allowing his bishop to come out. And then queenside castle, bishop to a6, attacking the queen. And queen to e5. The only other option really was queen to e1, which I didn't like. I thought this was a pretty good outpost. I could get around pretty easily from here, but it's not actually that good. He ended up playing knight to d7, attacking the queen, but it's not a very strong move because I just played queen to g3, very safe, and now there's a threat of this bishop coming to h6, threatening mate on this pawn. So a better move would have been knight to c6, attacking the queen, and now we have this two pieces attacking this pawn and only one knight defending, so the queen has to stay close enough to defend this. And this square is obviously not allowed, so I have to choose between these two. And if queen comes here, then knight to g4, and this queen's in trouble because of the knight, of course. But the scary thing is if queen to f4 to keep the pawn protected, then knight comes to f2, forking the rook and queen, and the other rook. So that's no good. So queen must move down here to defend this pawn, which means knight comes in here, takes that pawn, attacking the knight. Very bad news. So that move was open, coming from knight to c6, but he played knight to d7, so I was able to play queen to g3 and get off okay. And then bishop takes on f1, and I recaptured with the rook on the h-file because I wanted to keep this rook lined up with his queen, because I could easily see these being traded off and that going pretty well. So from here he plays knight to f8, which is a really bizarre and somewhat wasted move. I have no idea what he was thinking with that, but it doesn't end up helping him really. It opened up bishop g5, pinning this knight and x-raying the queen. He played bishop takes on c3, and I had to recapture with the pawn, which leaves my king open with this weak doubled pawns, but he doesn't have either bishop, and his queen's kind of locked in, so my king is still very safe. He then plays knight to e4, attacking the queen and the bishop, but opening up his queen. And from here there's three options white has. Can either capture the queen, queen to h4, lining up on the queen, and double protecting this bishop so that if... Obviously you can't do that. And the third option is rook to e1, and then that would happen. So if we look at these in more detail, rook to e1, knight takes, bishop takes queen, and now rook on a takes on d8, pawn takes, and this is pretty strong for black. He has better pawn structure, his rooks are lined up in the center, so it's slightly favorable for black in that, so you don't want to do the rook to e1. Queen to h4 is actually really strong, because now the queen needs to move, and the queen doesn't really want to move, so that kind of sucks for it, but it can come down here, which is okay. But then we have c4, and if queen takes, then queen takes knight. So that's no good, needs to protect this knight, so queen comes over here. But that's also not so nice, because then we have options like queen to f4, and then after something like this, white has a very nice position, centered rooks, knight in a very good place, reasonable pawn structure, and that's certainly favorable for white. But what I ended up doing was bishop taking on d8, and then that continues as knight takes, and that is followed by... He took with the rook on his e-file, which is actually... Oh, sorry, I forgot. Pawn takes knight. And then he took here, which... I think this is much stronger, but... that's okay. And then I followed that up with knight to e5, which I thought was pretty strong, getting my knight centered. And then after f6, knight to c6, attacking the rook. Rook to d6, knight to b4, a5, knight to d3, rook from a to d8, lining them up here. I played f4, getting my pawns active, planning on doing maybe these pawns coming up one and then getting some trade to remove my doubled pawns, although that doesn't end up really happening for a while. He plays c5, which is a huge blunder, because he just straight up loses a pawn. Pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, and now he has his two rooks lined up on my one, but I have the rook and king defending, and he must do this trade now, because if he moves his rook, then this is all bad for black. So rook takes, and now he can either trade rooks, or do what he did and attack my knight, to which I responded with knight to b7. And rook takes on c3, knight takes on a5, rook takes on g3. Which looks pretty good. He won the pawn back, so he's not behind there anymore. But I have these two passed pawns, and my rook can pretty easily defend that pawn. Which is how I respond, I believe? Let's see, where am I? Rook takes g3, yeah, rook to d2, and then he plays h5, planning on pushing these pawns and trying to queen down here. But then we have the magical move, knight to c4, and that is just horrible, horrible news for black, because there's now nothing to stop this pawn. So to stop this pawn, he needs his rook to be able to stop this square, and to do that it needs to be either on this rank or this file. And he can't do that, because the only ways to get to this rank are from here, here, or here. And that doesn't work. That doesn't work. And that doesn't work. So this pawn is now completely unstoppable, which is really bad news for him. But he plays knight to g6. For who knows why. That doesn't seem like a very strong move. Well, it attacks this pawn, which apparently he wanted, but I don't know. a4. I'm just going to push that, let that die. Knight takes on f4. a5. e6 was played. a6. Knight to e6. a7. Knight to c7, so if I advance he takes, but rook to d7. I'm just letting this pawn die because it doesn't matter anymore. If I queen, then that's it. Or actually, sorry, rook to d8 for check first, and then his king retreats, and now rook to d7, knight to a8, rook to d8, and yuck, rook takes on g2, rook takes knight, and this is actually much closer than it looks, because if I don't queen, then he probably wins. Like, these four connected pawns are stronger than the knight right now, but he can't stop the queening. So, it's just how it goes, I guess. So he plays a rook to g1 check, and king retreats, and now there's nothing he can do. He plays h4, and then rook to d8, h3, then I queen, and he resigns, because there's nothing he can do at this point. You can see this is just nothing. So, that was an interesting game. He missed more than one very nice variation that I pointed out there. So, whoops by him. He was rated about 1400, which is one of the highest I've ever played, so I'm surprised he missed so much, but it ended up being really cool. I loved this knight to c4, completely blocking off that rook. It was a very cool game. So yeah, that's all, and this is Cheese Factory signing out.